There's something most people never really question. From a very early age, you're taught to measure intelligence, grades, test scores, how quickly someone understands something, how easily they can explain it back. And over time, without anyone saying it directly, people get placed into categories: smart, average, slow. You start noticing patterns: who raises their hand first, who stays quiet, who seems to struggle just a little longer than everyone else. And without realizing it, you begin forming conclusions, not out loud, but internally. This person is sharp. This person is slower. This person probably won't keep up. It becomes automatic. You don't question it, you just absorb it. And eventually, you start seeing intelligence as something fixed, something measurable, something that defines a person. But here's the part most people never stop to ask: what does it actually feel like to exist on the very far end of that scale? Not as a label, not as a number, but as a real internal experience. Because once you slow down and look closer, it doesn't mean what you think it means. IQ stands for intelligence quotient. It's designed to measure specific cognitive abilities: reasoning, problem solving, processing speed, the ability to handle abstract ideas. The average score sits around 100. Anything below 70 is typically classified as an intellectual disability. And when it drops even further, around 40 or 50, it's considered severe. But this is where the misunderstanding begins. A very low IQ doesn't mean there's nothing there. It doesn't mean someone is empty, or unaware, or disconnected from reality. It doesn't mean they don't experience life. What it actually means is something more specific. The brain processes information differently, not absent, not inactive, just structured in a way that doesn't align with how intelligence is usually measured. And because of that, their experience of the world is shaped in a completely different way. When psychologists study this more closely, they don't describe the brain as broken. They describe it as organized differently, especially in areas like the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning, reasoning, decision-making, and thinking ahead. In individuals with very low IQ, this area tends to show reduced connectivity. Signals move more slowly. Information doesn't combine as easily. Things that feel automatic to you, understanding, cause and effect, predicting consequences, reading between the lines, require significantly more effort. Sometimes, those abilities don't fully develop, which means the world isn't processed through layers of prediction and abstraction. There's less anticipation, less mental simulation, less what if. And from the outside, that can look like limitation. But from the inside, it's just a different way of experiencing reality. Because here's what almost no one pays attention to. Even with those limitations, many individuals still show strong emotional sensitivity. They respond to tone of voice, to warmth, to consistency. They recognize familiar faces. They remember who feels safe. They form attachments, not in a complex analytical way, but in a direct, immediate way. They learn through repetition, through routine, through patterns that stay predictable. Their world isn't built on abstract thinking. It's built on direct experience. What they can see, what they can feel, what they can recognize again and again. And inside that structure, there's often a kind of stability that people don't expect. Not confusion, not emptiness, just a different kind of order. If your mind relies heavily on abstraction, you're rarely fully in the present. You're thinking ahead, replaying the past, analyzing what something might mean. You don't just experience something, you interpret it. You compare it. You predict where it leads. There's always another layer running in the background. Another possibility. Another version of what could happen. But when that layer is reduced, experience becomes more immediate, more grounded, less filtered through meaning, more connected to what's actually happening. Instead of asking, what does this mean? It becomes, this is happening. Instead of imagining 10 outcomes, you respond to the one in front of you. And that changes everything. Reality feels simpler, but also more direct, less mentally crowded, but also less flexible. There's less overthinking, but also less ability to step outside the moment. It's not better. It's not worse. It's just different. If you've never thought about intelligence this way, pause for a second. Because most people only understand intelligence through performance, through speed, through comparison, through visible ability. But once you step outside of that, you start seeing something else. Different ways of experiencing reality. So, I want to ask you, when you hear low IQ, what do you picture? And after hearing this, does that image shift even slightly? Drop a comment. I read them, and I want to see how your perspective changes. There's a psychologist named Howard Gardner who challenged this entire framework. He argued that intelligence isn't just one thing, it's multiple. Different forms, different expressions, different ways of interacting with the world. Linguistic, logical, spatial, emotional, social, physical, and what we usually call intelligence is just the type that performs well in structured systems. School, tests, work environments. It predicts how well someone fits into those systems. But it doesn't measure empathy, emotional awareness, connection, presence, and those are the things that shape how people actually experience each other. Here's something that tends to surprise people. Research shows that individuals with very low IQ can be highly responsive emotionally, not in a complex analytical way, but in a direct intuitive way. They respond to tone, to facial expressions, to emotional warmth. They can sense when someone is kind, when someone is tense, when something feels safe or unsafe. Because the emotional brain, the limbic system, operates separately from abstract reasoning. It doesn't need complex thought to recognize connection. And in many cases, that system remains active, responsive, capable of forming real emotional bonds. So when you step back and look at all of this, it raises a bigger question. What actually defines intelligence? Because the things people value most, love, loyalty, connection, feeling, understood, don't come from abstract reasoning. They come from deeper systems, more instinctive, more emotional, more fundamental. And those systems aren't measured by IQ tests. They exist outside of that framework. This is where things start to feel uncomfortable, because it challenges something most people assume, that higher intelligence equals higher value, that being smarter makes someone more capable, more complete, more worthy. But when you really look at it, that assumption doesn't fully hold, because someone can struggle with reasoning and abstraction and still feel deeply, still recognize connection, still form bonds that are real. And that forces you to question what intelligence actually represents. The brain doesn't stop working just because it works differently. It adapts. It builds around its limitations. It finds patterns that are manageable. It relies on repetition, on routine, on familiarity. It creates stability through consistency. It may not operate through abstraction, but it still creates a version of reality that makes sense within its structure. And once you see that, it becomes harder to reduce someone to a number. Understanding this doesn't just change how you see low IQ, it changes how you define intelligence itself. Because intelligence isn't just about how well someone can think, it's about how they experience reality, how they respond, how they connect, how they exist within their environment. And those things don't fit neatly into a score. Most people assume that being more intelligent means having a richer experience, more awareness, more understanding, more depth. But that's not always how it works. Sometimes, more abstraction creates more distance, more thinking, more analyzing, more separating yourself from the present moment. And sometimes less abstraction means being more directly connected to what's happening, less filtered, less layered, more immediate. And that changes the experience entirely. Not richer, not poorer, just different. So maybe the real takeaway isn't about high IQ or low IQ. It's about recognizing that the way we measure intelligence is limited. And once you see that, it becomes harder to judge people based on where they fall on a scale. Because being human isn't just about thinking, it's about feeling, connecting, experiencing. And those things don't disappear just because someone processes the world differently. If this made you pause or rethink something, you've always assumed there's a lot more like this to explore. So if you want more videos that break down human behavior in a way that actually feels real, consider subscribing. Because we're going to keep unpacking these patterns in a way that helps you understand people without reducing them to labels. And over time, you might start to notice something subtle. That intelligence isn't a ladder. It's not something you move up or down. It's just different ways of experiencing the same world.